all you, Doug.
Okay, good evening. This meeting is called to order at 5:36. Mr. Kowalik, can you please take a roll call of who's present?
Yes, sir. Advisory Board Member Irwin. Here. Advisory Board Member Francis.
Here.
Advisory Board Member Gaffney.
Here.
Advisory Board Member Nava.
Here.
Advisory Board Member Beal is absent, and Chair Rogers.
I'm here.
Excellent. We have quorum.
Okay. All right. Let's have a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'd like to ask Robert Nava to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let's see. Do any members of our board have any announcements that you'd like to? No? Okay. How about staff? Does staff have any announcements?
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I'd just like to make one announcement. This week is National Public Works Week. Last week, City Council read a proclamation into the record acknowledging the hard work of the men and women of this department and of public works professionals nationally to be responsive and resilient in their work. And I just want to say I feel strongly after being here for 1 year that our team and our staff absolutely meets those values of readiness and resiliency. We are ready to respond. We have staff who sacrifice time away from their families, who come in the middle of the night to deal with water main breaks and trees coming down and things like that. And we're also very resilient. We look for long-term solutions to our infrastructure problems, particularly in engineering, but also in our operations as well. So I just wanted to make a plug for our department in celebration of Public Works Week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any comment from the general public? Hi, Paul.
Good evening, and thanks for having us back at your meetings. My name is Paul Donnelly. I'm a resident, homeowner, ratepayer here in Morro Bay, and I had some comments to make about the water reclamation facility. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but on contract amendment number 3 that you have with Anvil, it stipulates at the time of completion to have everything done with the WRF lift stations and pipelines will be, quote, completed no later than September 30th, 2022, end quote. That leaves 135 days remaining in their contract before they will default. The updated sign on the bike path now says it'll be closed until 10/1. That's just for the bike path. The new signs that are put up along the Atascadero Road says that work there will go until August 1st. Anvil still needs to install pipes in the freeway southbound on-ramp, but we do not know when that will occur. Anvil also still needs to install the IPR pipe down the entire length of Quintana Road, according to Paul Amico at the last City Council meeting. They have yet to meet any of the schedules, so don't hold your breath. We were told that the South Bay Boulevard would be closed for only 8 weeks, but in fact it was 4 months. Meanwhile, the contractor at the WRF site is being delayed because Anvil will not have the plumbing in place for that plant to operate, so expect a delay claim from them. The traffic control presently happening on Atascadero Road in front of the existing wastewater treatment plant does not necessarily jive with the approved plans. The plans show traffic to be detoured where Anvil has parked its trucks, placed supplies and stockpiles, occupying the site on the north side. They are not prepared for the work to install the piping here in the roadway. The pavement replacement on Quintana Road does not fully comply with the pipeline construction contract specifications. Subpart 3.5B of the section 02770 says, quote, maximum deviation 1/8 inch from lower edge of a 3.6 meter per in 12 feet and per in straight edge, end quote. Subpart 1.7B of section 01130 says, contractor shall install final paving within 3 weeks of providing temporary drivable pavement.
Paul, you have about a half a minute, but there'll be other
Okay.
opportunities to speak on this subject because it is on the agenda.
Okay, pavement markings have been lacking, and it's confusing as to where traffic lanes are, especially at night. This is a safety issue, so why isn't this adequately being provided for the motoring public? There are obvious deviations from the approved pipeline plans, especially along what used to be the bike path. The joint trench has shifted several feet over to the west of the temporary construction easement on the Vista property, where all that vegetation had been removed. Why was this changed, and who approved the change? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comments from the public?
Chair, I'd ask that you ask AGP if anyone's in the queue online. We may have some folks in Zoom.
Okay, is there any public comment in the queue, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have a comment from Scott Collins.
Yeah, AGP is just asking that I be put in as a panelist. No comments other than that. Thank you.
My bad. Sorry.
That's
You'll
okay.
be,
No
promoted.
problem. Appreciate it.
All right, and we have an actual public comment from Carol Truesdale. Carol, you have been allowed to speak.
Thank you very much. See, this is my first time, well, actually, first time in a long period of time. I am concerned about the issues that Mr. Donnelly has brought forward. I have seen the increase in traffic because I take the rapid transit around town, so I see the backlog on our streets of people zipping through and et cetera. I wrote to Scott Collins about this previously, and I have to compliment Scott that he did comment to me that they would address this with MBPD. And I hope and pray that that's going to happen. Our citizens' lives are too precious. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There are no more public commenters in the queue.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the meeting minutes from last month, April 20th. Are there any comments from the advisory board members on the minutes? Okay, is there any public comment on the minutes from last month? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
And Chair, just as a point of order, if you could ask AGP if there's anyone in the queue.
Yes, okay, is there any public comment on the minutes in the queue, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands for this public comment.
Okay, thank you. Then may we have a motion to approve the minutes? Steve? Second. Ian? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Okay, the next item is the director's update. And is there a presentation from staff?
Thank you, Chair. I'll give a very short verbal presentation. The director's update was included in the agenda packet, and as you know, I don't make a habit of going through this point by point, but certainly we're available for questions. We are excited that we did submit a grant request to SLOCOG for ADA accessibility and safety improvements at the intersection of Quintana and Main. We did get a preliminary look at how we stand compared to other cities that are competing for the same money in the county, and we're kind of high middle of the pack. I think that's better than being at the bottom. And so we will be in coordination with SLOCOG to learn more. We may still owe them some documents to support that application. But again, this is something that the engineering division is working on. Transit will be starting up again on June 4th and will run to September 25th. And they'll be running the trolley from those dates. Some of you may have noticed, if you've been down the parking lot between Stax and the Great American Fish Company there, our maintenance staff painted directional arrows in the parking lot, and they restriped the parking lot. So that was very good. The old lines were very faded and difficult to see for drivers. And really thankful for maintenance for taking care of that. And then finally, utilities is in the midst of our tank rehabilitation project. And one thing I'd like to note, there is a perception that we're not currently under construction on any project. That is not true. We are under construction in the tank rehabilitation project. That is one of the One Water projects. That's the first one we got out the door. And we are doing some work at the King's tanks. I believe one of the King's tanks is still down. Is that correct, Damaris? Okay. And if there's any technical questions about that project, we do have Damaris and Eric here to answer those. And with that, I'll take questions.
Other questions from the board members?
Yes, I have a couple minor questions. One is, what is the current status of recruiting for the empty position on the PWAP?
I saw in an email that there was one applicant. That applicant will have to go to council. Unfortunately, I don't have more information than that, but I believe there is one person who did apply.
Okay, and then the other question is, and I'd like to have it in about 10 words or less, what's the current status on issuing the pavement management contract?
I'll pass that along to our city engineer, Eric Ridio.
Eric Ridio, city engineer. As far as the current fiscal year pavement management contract, upon coming under employment with the city, I reviewed the project. The design was not 100% complete, so we have signed a contract with the design engineer, Pavement Engineering, to complete that work. So we anticipate 100% drawings in the next 2 to 3 weeks, at which point after that we would advertise the project for construction. So it may not be listed before the end of the fiscal year, but that money will carry over to be able to list that project.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions. Thank you.
Eric, I would just like to ask you about Highway 1. And last month we talked about some of the options, and I'd like to just understand what's the latest.
Sure. As far as what it was presented last month, I've been in touch with Caltrans, and I've asked them to do a similar presentation to council, so they've agreed to that. They will be presenting at council, it looks like, the June 14th meeting, and doing a similar presentation. I do have all of your comments and suggestions ready to pass on to them. I will also equally do that with council's feedback, and we'll be submitting that to them before their August time frame that they wanted feedback. So if you do have additional items that you'd like to forward to me, please do so, but we do have some time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board members? Yeah, Steve? Oh, no. All right. How about public comment on the director's report? Okay, are there any comments in the queue from the public?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on Director's report? Okay, can I?
And Chair Rogers, I may have written something else down on the packet I gave you, but this one does not actually need any advisory board action.
Okay,
So,
Excellent.
and as goes for items A2, A3, A4, and A5 or A6, unless the board has any formal feedback that they'd like to give on A5 and A6.
on A5 and A6.
So not right now, but when we get to those. So at this point, if there's no discussion on the board, you can move to item A3.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, that's what we're going to do is, apparently there are some discussion on the role of the PWAB, which should be of interest to all of us.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair Rogers. As the advisory board knows, at the second council meeting in April, City Council heard a staff report and recommendations to update the advisory board roles. Some of the bylaws were updated for some of the advisory boards. Some of the rules had some minor changes. I'd just like to review a few of those with this group and take questions after. So first of all, and perhaps most importantly, as you may know, the WARF quarterly report used to be taken to the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. That report is Carollo's project management team's kind of big picture report on the project that looks at schedule, that looks at budget, cash flow, and significant challenges and accomplishments of the WARF program. And the City Council has decided to avoid confusion, and I don't need to go into detail, but you're welcome to look at the staff report from the second meeting in April from City Council. The City Council has directed that WARF quarterly report to now come to the PWAB. CFAC will still be reviewing cash flow issues for the WARF program, loan issues, and things like that. But the PWAB will be looking at the budget, the schedule, significant activities, accomplishments, and challenges. So later in today's meeting, we do have Paul Amico from Carollo who will be presenting the newest quarterly report. It also happens to be a revised report in terms of its format. So those of you who have read the report before, it used to be a 50 to 60 page report. And Paul is the new program manager for the WARF project and has worked with the WARF subcommittee, which includes the mayor and Councilmember Heller and staff to really streamline that report and make it into a plain language format so that the average resident of the city of Morro Bay can actually digest its contents, because that's feedback that we receive from the public and from the WARF subcommittee. So that is one of the big changes that comes out of that city council meeting as it relates to PWAB. The other is, as you know, the city council every 2 years puts together citywide goals. That's a rather long process that involves community meetings and public meetings. I think it was back in October or November, we talked about city council goals in the PWAB, and then those suggestions that were made here as they relate to maintenance and infrastructure and utilities were then taken to city council. And then city council approved the new city goals. Those goals, which I happen to have a couple copies of if anyone would like one after the meeting, they're also on our website, they're public, are public infrastructure, fiscal sustainability and economic vitality, housing, climate action, and community health. Now, each of those goals has short-term actions associated with each goal. So, for example, with public infrastructure, there is a short-term action to initiate a capital assessment effort and to conduct a traffic speed survey. So those short-term actions that relate to the Public Works Department will become the work plan, a formal work plan for PWAB. And so that's something that I'll bring at a later meeting to kind of show what PWAB's work plan is for the next 2 years. So there is an option for the PWAB to add things to the work plan, but there's a process for that. So if PWAB felt that there was something missing, or maybe there was a change, maybe, I don't know, a road collapsed and now that became the city's top priority, that could get put into the action plan. And that would need, to add something to the action plan would need a majority vote from the PWAB, which would then be taken to council for approval. And then we could add it to the PWAB action plan. Now, we still will be reviewing items that are not included in the PWAB action plan. For example, I'll still be bringing the director's updates. We're now going to be bringing capital project updates regularly. If we have something like we did with Coleman Park where we want feedback, we'll bring that to you. But we will also have this formal work plan. And the one other thing I wanted to mention, and this did not come out of the city council meeting, but without going into a deep history, I've noticed, one of my observations is that the Public Works Department has not had a process for evaluating traffic concerns. So we oftentimes will get phone calls or emails saying, you need to put a stop sign here, or you need to take away the stop sign, or you need to put speed bumps on this street. People are speeding. And, historically, someone internally just made a decision on that, and it just kind of depended on who was in charge, whether something got done or didn't get done. And so after consulting with Eric Ridio, our new city engineer, we decided to kind of create a public process to evaluate these traffic issues. And so we're not going to do that tonight, but we think once every 2 months or so, we'll bring you a list of traffic concerns that have come up that we will do some research on and possibly even have a traffic engineer evaluate and then bring those to this board for evaluation and recommendations to City Council. So this is something we're really excited about. We know that our community wants the department to be responsive on traffic issues, and we think that the best way to do that is to include this board in a public process where we can do that. And I know some of you on this board are really interested in traffic issues, so I see one person nodding. So anyway, we are very excited about. So those are the big changes. WARF Quarterly now comes to this group. We're going to have a formal work plan as PWAB, and I'll be bringing that regularly. And also, we will be reviewing traffic issues, which is not part of our formal work plan, but just something that staff will be bringing. So with that, I'll take any questions.
John?
What's included under your short-term capital assessment and the action plan for that?
Yeah, so these are very high level in terms of what's in the document. So it says here, initiate a capital assessment effort for harbor, facilities, stormwater, et cetera. We are requesting, as a department, we are requesting some funding for next fiscal year to begin a capital assessment process. That is something that we will be bringing to PWAB as a point of discussion once that budget is approved. For one, we will need to initiate an update to the One Water Plan. It's supposed to be updated every 5 years, and the One Water Plan was written in 2018. So probably towards the end of this calendar year, we'll begin that. Again, assuming we get funded for that, so that the update can be ready by the next fiscal year. We also, don't have, for example, a Parks Master Plan or an active transportation plan. We don't know what capital projects to prioritize along the harbor. So these are things that the capital assessment will do, will be to help us prioritize the projects. And again, that's something that is going to include a public component and will include PWAB as well.
And I assume that it would also include reviewing the status of the pavement?
Well, we do have a pavement management plan. Maybe Eric can speak to that.
Yeah, as far as pavement goes, we do have a pavement management system through Street Saver. It's a software program. In my short time with the city, I don't think we're using to its full capabilities, so I think that's something we will be doing, and we will be looking at having a consultant assist with those efforts. But as far as pavement goes, I think my preference would be to keep it separate. Pavement management, being that it's a full, it's a very high dollar, capital intensive effort. I think it's something that we don't want to be, it's probably its own assessment. So I think the capital assessment that for the other public works would be intensive on facilities and parks and other assets. But as far as the pavement system, this is something we'll discuss, but I think it's going to come out of our pavement budget specifically to have a consultant focus on that by itself.
And whenever I assume there would be almost an annual kind of statement about what's going on with the pavement plan, just to keep it where it needs to be in order to correct some of our failures right now.
That's correct. The last annual report was in 2020, so that's something that ideally you would do every year.
Okay.
And you would also do ratings every year, so that would be something we would work into a contract with a consultant, is to do yearly ratings, not of the entire network, but have a system where we're rating at least part of the network every year. And that's the only way you know if the PCI is accurate, if you're actually looking at the pavement on an annual basis.
And some sort of discussion of ongoing funding should probably be included on an annual basis for that.
Correct. Yeah, looking at budget scenarios over time would be part of that effort. Also looking at a multi-year pavement plan, prioritizing, what streets are going to be used. You're going to be doing, your surface treatments versus your more intensive treatments. So that's all things we have to look at.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
Good evening, PWAB members. You just were talking about streets, so I thought I'd just get up and talk about what Mr. Rideau. So pavement management isn't just, we need these streets paved, but it's also about double checking what the contractor has done. For instance, the last time Pacific Street was paved, the contractor undulated. Do you know what that means? They finished the street, and now, I'm sure in the days when my children were skateboarding, they would have loved this because the street goes like this. It's not flat. So when I say you should check their work, drive it. Send your inspectors out. If it's not right, have them rip it out. They should be bonded for stuff like this. I am not a happy camper because I have to drive down the street with my car going like this. Sometimes I drive on the left-hand side, going south, going east. Where am I? West. Just to avoid the bumps in the road, and it's every 5 or 10 feet. Yeah, it's a skateboarder stream, but I'm not a skateboarder. My kids are long grown up. And if you're a contractor sitting up there and you do a job, you dang right want to know that your project comes out well, don't you? Because you want to be given more jobs. Well, I'd like to know who did my street. It's up between Kings and Bay. It's awful. I'd invite any one of you to go drive down that part of the boulevard. And right now we've got traffic galore because it's a detour for the state water project. I mean, for the sewer project going on now. So even though the city is behind on the paving of their streets, make it right. Follow up with them. Go look and inspect the jobs that you're actually letting to these contractors so that we have nice streets to drive on, not just something that's undulated like ours or that is going to crack and be full of potholes the next time we all turn around. Okay? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Linda Donnelly, Morro Bay.
Chair, may I respond to Linda's comments?
Sure.
Ms. Donnelly, that's certainly something we can look into. I just do want to share some good news that we're actually currently training up an individual, a very knowledgeable individual within our staff to be a public works inspector for this very reason. So that is a very, very recent addition, and that's not a new staff person. We're transferring this individual. We're very excited about that. And I think Eric would agree that it's a much-needed position. So that feedback is well taken, and we can perhaps research that street offline. I'm not familiar with when that happened, but we can look at that.
Okay, hi, Paul.
Yeah, Paul Donnelly again. I just wanted to make a comment about something that Greg brought up about the traffic controls in town. Years ago, way before the Public Works Advisory Board ever existed, I was the chairman of the street committee back then. And we used to get routinely requests for a stop sign here or something over here. We didn't want to put something in that would then cause a problem on the neighboring street. So what we did is everybody on the board drove the neighborhoods in the south part of town, came up with their recommendation, and when we wanted to, we would implement it the whole part of the town all at once, so we didn't have any confusion. Everybody felt naturally this has got to be a stop, this should be a yield, and that's how that got developed in the south part of town. So a recommendation is have each one of you go and drive those neighborhoods that you're bringing up and come up with your own recommendations of where you think traffic control devices should be, stops, yield, and then implement them on a neighborhood-wide at one time rather than confusing everybody. Just a suggestion.
Okay, are there any public comments in the queue, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
All right. Thank you. Is there any more discussion? Okay. I'm not sure if we need approval for this. I don't think so.
No, sir. Thank you, Chair Rogers. This was a fun event that we had. Boy, I think it was two Sundays ago, where we planted some trees in Lilac Heiser Park. Something that was put together by one of our rising stars, Mr. Derek Hansen. No relation to Damaris Hansen, oddly, but Derek was a graduate of Cal Poly as a civil engineer. He's currently in engineering training and working on getting his PE eventually. We're giving him as much experience as we possibly can. And Eric put together this Arbor Day event for us in coordination with the rec department. So, Derek, I'm going to put your presentation on screen. AGP, I do not, maybe I do see it.
There it is.
Okay, thank you, and take it away, Derek.
There's the clicker. Hello. As mentioned, my name is Derek Hansen. I was the organizer of the Arbor Day event this year. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? All right. Hi. Thank you guys for having me. First off, a brief history on Arbor Day as a holiday. It was started in 1872 by J. Sterling Morton in Nebraska as a way of planting a relative handful more trees in the state, and it ended with over 1 million new trees, calling that state home. In the 150 years since that event, Arbor Day has grown from a national to an international holiday, being celebrated in every hemisphere, and is supported nowadays by the Arbor Day Foundation, which, at least in the United States, certifies cities and campuses as Tree City USA and Tree Campuses USA. Morro Bay itself has been a Tree City USA for the last 25 years. As for this specific year's event, on May 1st at Lila Kaiser Park, right across the street from the high school, we planted 4 Monterey cypress saplings, 3 in the parking lot divider and 1 close to the playground. We did this with the manpower of volunteers from Morro Bay Beautiful and Morro Bay in Bloom, as well as coordination with the Maintenance Department and Recreation Services Departments. We were fortunate to have City Council member Laurel Barton as a speaker on the event, speaking on some of the history of Arbor Day, both globally and within the city. You can see in the image here one of the first saplings that was planted, along with a couple of volunteers from Morro Bay and Bloom and our own Greg. Additionally, here you can see on the left the tent that refreshments were served under by the Recreation Services Department. We were expecting at most maybe a dozen people present, but we ended up having closer to 16 or 18 people between staff and volunteers, and it was really nice to see everybody come out for the holiday. On the right, you see the tree that we planted close to the playground in the dirt near the sprinklers, as the volunteers are making sure the hole is filled to the right depth for the sapling to flourish. Why Lila Kaiser Park? Well, there were a number of reasons. First off, it was one of few places where there were several spaces for saplings in close proximity to each other. We were looking to avoid having to have volunteers cross Morro Bay in order to get a few more trees in, so the opportunity of 4 trees in one place is too good to pass up. Additionally, it's fitting to do it at Lila Kaiser specifically because the center dividers that we planted trees in used to have tea trees in them. However, they were removed a few years back. It's good to be putting the tree, to be replacing some of that greenery. Additionally, being in a park afforded us the opportunities we wouldn't have if we were planting trees, say, on a street in downtown Morro. It was thanks to us being in a park that we could have those refreshments set up for people, as well as having a space for Laurel Barton to speak. So Lila Kaiser ended up being a very good place for Arbor Day this year. As for the trees themselves, that's the wrong button. That's the right button. Monterey cypress trees were chosen for a number of reasons. They were very well suited to the microclimate of Lila Kaiser Park and surrounding areas, as they are both salt and wind resistant, having evolved toward the Monterey coast. Additionally, they have an established presence in Lila Kaiser Park. In the photo here, you can see in the background, those trees are adult Monterey cypress trees, planted quite close together. They have been there as far back as I could find images for, which dates at least 20 years, and they're growing quite healthy. In addition, Monterey cypress trees are dry trees. They do not have fruits. They do not drip sap. Instead, what falls off of them is at most cones and some sticks. Much easier to clean off of any cars that may be parked nearby, and will not be crushed underfoot in a way that makes a mess. Additionally, they are very strong trees. Their roots are strong and hold them quite securely in place, which means it's unlikely that they will be falling over anytime soon. However, roots being so strong and so close to an asphalt does bring up a couple of concerns, which we have accounted for. We made sure that there were no utilities, no sewers or conduits underneath the trees or anywhere near them. We also made sure to communicate with an arborist on getting root protections put into place and making sure that the trees were spaced enough out to interfere neither with each other nor the nearby asphalt. These root protections will be moved back as the trees grow larger, and we've coordinated with the maintenance department on that and making sure they get enough water to get to the size that adult Monterey cypresses do. Do you have any questions?
Yes. One of the agenda items that we've been talking about is gradual over the long-term tree replacement here in the city of Morro Bay. And I'm just curious, you made the comment of the microclimate of Lila Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the microclimate on Quintana? I mean, what's the extent of this microclimate that's good for the cypress trees?
I do not have that information.
So perhaps Damaris Hanson can address that. Damaris wrote our urban forestry management plan some 12 years ago, I believe.
Some time ago. There is in that plan, it shows all the different microclimates in Morro Bay. There's several different ones. This one's in microclimate, I think, 2 or something because of the salt air and everything. Quintana would be a completely different microclimate. The plan also tells you the microclimate's in and suggests trees that grow well in it. So it gives you a decent list of trees that could do well on Quintana Road. But off the top of my head, I don't know what those are right now. I'd have to look back at the plan.
That plan is available on our website under Public Works trees.
Yes.
I do believe I found that plan in my research for this event and used it as reference.
How long is it estimated for the saplings to need watering before they're self-sustaining?
The saplings will need to be watered every other week for at least 2 years, after which point they are considered mature.
You mentioned that you planted 4 trees. Is there like a plan to plant more trees in that location? I mean, especially like in the parking lot, is there only 1 tree in the parking lot area?
I'll take that. We don't have a plan for that at this time. We were looking for locations specifically for Arbor Day. As part of the WARF program, we are going to have a tree replacement plan. And we're going to be looking at all locations around the city for those replacements because of the number of trees that were removed and our ability to, or potential inability to plant those trees in the same location because of capacity issues. So that is something that we hope to bring to the PWAB possibly this summer.
Do we have a meeting this summer?
In August.
Is there any public comment for Derek Hansen? On the Arbor Day item.
I have comments about trees. Does that count?
You got 3 minutes.
Good evening again. So, I hate to rain on this Arbor Day great parade and honoring of the city because we are a tree city, I believe, as well as a bird sanctuary. But the last guesstimate count that we had for trees that were torn out was 42 along the bike path for the construction of all this, the pipelines that are going in. They weren't in any. I'm just going to read from script because I get off. The tree removal issue along what used to be the bike path had nothing to do with the argument of trees versus bushes, as the California Coastal Act defines removal of major vegetation as development, which requires a hearing and a permit approval from the California Coastal Commissioners, not staff at the Central Coast District Office of the California Coastal Commission in Santa Cruz, not staff. So you should really pay attention to when you hear the city use the word, the California Coastal Commission approved it. if it did not go to the commissioners, wasn't approved by the Coastal Commission. The draft pipeline plans, which initially showed just a few trees to be removed, did not come out until months after the commissioners met at the Embassy Suites in San Luis Obispo in July of 2019. We're in 2022. There's absolutely no mention of trees in the approved coastal development permit for the water reclamation facility project. None. Why are we being told that the Coastal Commission approved this destruction of vegetation? This might come up in the next item, in item A5. Anyway, just thought you should know because an arborist that the city hired, Rodney someone, he did a tree inventory and spray painted every single tree on the bike path. And I noted that, took pictures of every single one of them, believe it or not, because we used to be able to walk down the bike path, a beautiful walk. Children would ride their bikes to school. It's very highly used with dog walkers as well.
You got 30 seconds.
And so, appreciate what the Arbor Day did, but let's keep our eyes on the trees because we planted 4, but they took out at probably 50 or more by now. Thanks.
Any further comment?
Chair Rogers, I'd like to bring up our WARF Program Manager, Paul Amico, to provide a response about the number of trees that were taken down as well as the permitting.
Okay.
Good evening, board members. Paul Amico, WARF Program Manager. At this point, the way that the coastal permit was issued was the hearing was had and then we submitted plans. The plans identified the trees to be removed and it was 37 trees or 20, 37 trees, I think was the number of trees. And that was what Anvil was paid to remove. So a tree is defined as a vegetation with 6 inches in diameter at breast height. It's kind of an interesting measurement. And all the tree removal has been overseen by the program biologist, Kevin Merck. So,
thank you, Paul. I might just add too that our contractors do not do work unless they're getting paid for it. So one way we know the number of trees, and we'll have to double check that number. I thought it was 36, but it's 37. Is because that's what Anvil billed us for. And also, we're very careful about taking out trees. We love trees here. We are a tree city. The city takes a lot of pride in that. And we're also a bird sanctuary. And so we only removed trees that were absolutely necessary to be removed as part of the conveyance project, or trees that whose health would be affected or were already in really bad shape that posed some danger of falling or a hazard.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments?
Yeah, I had a question. Not all of Morro Bay is in the Coastal Commission zoning, is that right?
Do you have an answer to that, Damaris?
Are you talking about the appeals area,
Well,
or just like the coastal?
how
coastal
far
zone?
does the authority of the Coastal Commission go in
So it's virtually the whole city.
Yeah, yeah. There's one tiny portion that's out of the coastal zone area, but
And then for the appeal zones, I know that there's certain areas where, because of development, they don't care about those areas. Do you have an area, do you have like subdivisions and stuff like that? Usually, once they're in, the Coastal Commission doesn't pay attention too much to those. Is that how it works?
well, the city issues the coastal development permit on their behalf.
Okay. So we have been in, the development permit is that a blanket or is that individual?
They're individual for each project.
Okay, thank you.
So, and the coastal development permit for the wharf covers the entire length of the project. And if you're interested in seeing a map of what the limits are of the Coastal Commission's boundary, that's certainly something we can provide offline. That's public information.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Rogers, as a point of order, we'll need to check AGP if there's any public comment.
Yes, I was just going to do that. Are there any public comment in the queue, please?
Thank you, Chair. There is no raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to add also that, of course, our tree program is something near and dear to my heart as well, and we'll definitely be talking more about it. So I think that was a very good update, Derek. Thank you very much for that. And let's see. I think we're going to just move right on to A5, the quarterly report from Paul Amico, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present Paul Amico, who's been the program manager of the WARF program since, I believe, March. Does that sound right?
I think my inauguration was April Fool's Day.
However, Paul has been with the project much longer than that. He was the project manager for the conveyance component, and also was also involved in some of the beginning planning of the WARF program. So
Right.
I'll let Paul take away the WARF quarterly report.
All right, thank you. Okay, good. Paul Amico with Corollo Engineers, WARF program manager. So I've just got a short presentation to go over the quarterly report, and I actually have the report here from the agenda. So if there are any specific questions, I can go over those after the presentation. As we always like to do, we like to give a construction update. A lot of folks have questions about what's going on, even though a lot of it is taking place in the public right away. But we are tucked away over off Teresa Road and South Bay Boulevard with the water reclamation facility itself. So I'll do a brief construction update, and then we can go through the quarterly report, hit the high points, and then really wanted to talk a bit about the program budget development, which the budget hearing will be next week. But everybody's seen the budget, so know that was of interest it would be of interest to PWAB before I open it up for questions. So pump stations A and B. Pump station A is the pump station that's down by the the existing wastewater treatment facility. It pumps flow that used to go to the existing wastewater treatment plant up to pump station B, and then pump station B then pumps all the flow to the water reclamation facility. So the pictures you see here of pump station A and B. The two pictures of those are the electrical buildings. The electrical buildings are typically, for the pump stations, our long lead time items. It's really where we lose some control of our schedule because we're dependent on PG&E, and once we get into that process, it generally takes many, many weeks to get PG&E out to energize those stations. So the contractor's been focusing very hard on those, so we can get the pump station started up in time for sending wastewater to the new plant. So those are the pictures you see there. South Bay Boulevard is open. It did go a bit past the 8-week schedule that we'd originally discussed. And just for some background on that, and I know it's frustrating when we don't necessarily meet schedules. Once we got through the initial 8 weeks and got through some wet weather, Anvil had some COVID issues on their crews, so some setbacks that were kind of out of their control. We got up to the Highway 1 ramps, and we realized that as we started looking at it and looking at how the traffic patterns had been established, and then really started thinking through in detail and working with Caltrans on how we would get traffic back and get that road back open, we concluded that it would be best to keep that closure in place, spend the next 8 weeks getting to the water reclamation facility, because we would have had to put the traffic in an alternating one-way pattern with automated stoplights. And so we concluded that that wasn't really the best situation that we would put the public into because it would cause very long backups on South Bay Boulevard and potentially on Highway 1, which is unacceptable to Caltrans. So Highway 1 would generally tend to get all the stoplights, and so that would cause traffic to back up, and then we'd have an unsafe condition where people are trying to turn onto Quintana from South Bay Boulevard as opposed to trying to get to Highway 1. So we kept the closure in place, and we committed to the community, and Anvil worked very, very hard, and we got it open by the end of April. So we were very pleased with that. So the pictures here you can see are us getting the final paving in, and that is final paving. We do have a few punch list items that Anvil has to address with that paving, but for the most part it's open, or it's completed. So that area has been tested, and that's fully complete in that with final paving. Striping will occur at a later date once the pavement has cured some more. I'm not a pavement expert, and I don't really know why that happens, but obviously if there's any questions about when striping could occur, we could ask the city engineer. So the bike path and utility bridge. The utility bridge was affected by our programmatic agreement between EPA and the State Historic Preservation Office. There was some archaeological clearance that needed to happen for that pipe bridge abutments, and so that work was completed. It took quite a while to get that work done, but it was completed, and now the pipe bridge is underway. As you can see, the reinforcing steel on the picture on the right. This is the base of I think that's the south abutment there, and then you can see the pipes being installed along the bike path in the left picture. So just a heads up on some upcoming change orders. We're going to be bringing contract amendment number 4 to Anvil's contract to City Council in June. The good news with that contract is we are actually going to be reducing their contract amount because a change order that the City Council had approved earlier in the year, which included improvements to the backup generators at both the pump stations, that made it through the Air Pollution Control District, and it turned out that the upgrades to move those to Tier 4 generators was not needed. So we actually get about a $300,000 credit back from Anvil, and this one will actually be a reduction in contract amount by, I think, a little over $100,000. So we did get some good news as it related to change orders. But one thing that did happen as we were going along South Bay Boulevard is there was unexpected bedrock that was encountered, and so there will be we're tracking that cost, and there will be a future change order that we will be bringing to City Council to address that. That was a slowdown in production and some additional costs that Anvil incurred for encountering that additional bedrock.
Is Teresa Road the one that goes up on the north side?
Yes, it goes to the Casa de Flores and
Okay.
the Convalescent Center up that way. So the water reclamation facility itself, today we had the privilege of hosting some board members, and we went and walked around. They're making great progress on the water reclamation facility. In fact, Granite Construction, one of the subcontractors for Filance, was prepping for paving. I believe paving the site will commence next week and be completed by the end of next week. So the facility's really starting to take shape, and we're very pleased with the progress. So I had mentioned at the last council meeting that we would be working the IPR from Main and Quintana toward the roundabout, and then also working the IPR line, the purified water line, down at the other end of Quintana. Right after that council meeting, unfortunately, I'm going to have to walk back some of that update, because right after that council meeting, we met with Anvil and we looked at their most recent schedule. We need to reprioritize some of their activity to more focus closely on the joint trench, what we call the joint trench, where there are the wastewater force mains and the effluent sewer or effluent pipe. I'll get into that in a little more detail as to why we wanted to do that and what was driving that when we discussed the schedule and the budget. But do want to say that just to conclude the construction update, we are going to be working the purified water line at the lower end of Quintana, I believe, starting next week. They're going to complete the work in Las Tunas over by the roundabout by Morro Bay Coffee. That work is expected to bring those pipes out of the microtunnel, out of the deep crossing under the roundabout. It's expected to take a couple months to get that completed and get that backfilled and get that repaved and get that area reopened. So just a couple little updates there.
A couple of months for that.
Yes. We hope to have, I think, Las Tunas, about 6 weeks. We want to have that open by the end of June. That's what Anvil's telling me right now. It's pretty complicated construction because that pit's pretty deep. It's about 25, 30 feet to the base of the pit. And to bring 4 pipelines and 2 fiber optic conduits up to the elevation. The design elevation is, and then to get that pit backfilled, pull the sheet pile. It's quite a bit of work in that, so there'll be a lot of activity in that intersection for quite a while. So it's all local there. Yeah.
Couple questions. How does it affect the contract schedule?
So the contract schedule, there was a comment from a community member about schedule, and we will be, because of the, and that work itself is not necessarily impacting the schedule. That was on schedule. It was scheduled work. That's part of their contract. But with the completion of the pipe bridge, with the recent schedule update that we got from Anvil Builders, we're going to be negotiating a schedule extension and a change order associated with that work, because the archaeological clearance work that we did to excavate the pipe bridge abutments differed from what they had bid. We had to use a different shoring system. There was much more time involved because of the interaction between our archaeologists and SHPO. So the production rates were much slower. So where they may have planned on, say, 2 or 3 days to excavate to get down to grade for the bridge abutment, that work took weeks for each one of the abutments. So they are entitled to some time and some additional compensation for that excavation work. We have not received their time impact analysis yet, and we haven't received, but we did get a recent schedule update. With the next one, they'll actualize those durations, and then we can start negotiating that change order once we receive their time impact analysis. So we don't quite yet know what that schedule impact is because they haven't submitted it. In addition to that, the city has requested some additional out-of-scope work from Anvil to repair some storm drains along Main Street. That's out-of-scope work. They'd be entitled to additional time for that. And then there's some modifications to the reverse osmosis treatment system down by the on Atascadero Road, driven by some changes that the regional board requested from the city related to the effluent from that facility and getting it into the city's outfall. So there's modifications both to yard piping and then also to the RO facility that would also add time to the contract. So again, these changes are future changes we're going to be negotiating with them, and so that we will be extending their contract. We just don't know at this time because we're in the middle of all of it, how much it would be.
I have what about, what needs to happen in order to keep, or was FBV, is that how you call them?
Phelons, yeah, FBV,
Phelons.
that's what we refer to them as. Yeah.
What needs to be in place so they can have the minimal impact on their schedule?
I've got, so if you don't mind, if I can just run through the rest of this, we do discuss it in a little bit. I can discuss that in a little more detail later in the presentation. Yeah, and when I have a schedule slide that I have that shows the new schedule, and we can kind of talk about it then if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Okay, great. So just want to hit the highlights on the quarterly report. If you have specific questions, glad to take those. But I think it's of interest to everyone to get to that schedule slide so we can have some good discussion around that and answer that question. So I don't know, several months ago through the WRF subcommittee, Councilmember Heller and the mayor had asked us to simplify the quarterly report format. It was a pretty daunting report, both to not just to read, but also to prepare. And so we really were asked to simplify it, use much more public-friendly language as opposed to use less technical language that's really just more for engineers and public works professionals to understand. Really appreciated the feedback and the leadership that the WRF subcommittee gave to us. And what you have in front of you now is the new format. And as Director Kwolek said, this now, it comes to PWAB where we can really have good discussion about the progress we're making and get input from you all on, in this case, how we're budgeting and scheduling and those sorts of things. So simplified the report format to shorten it up so that we hit the highlights in the main body of the report, push a lot of the technical information into appendices. It's all still there from the past reports. It's just now found in appendices to the report. And then one of the things that we were asked, and I actually really agreed with, was that we would present a very simple Gantt chart style schedule, so a bar chart schedule that really showed the critical path, and we could highlight those activities that were really controlling the completion of the program. So we did that, and I think that this format it was much easier to produce, much easier to write, and so we're pleased with what results we got, and we're interested in hearing your feedback as you all review it. and continuing to evolve this over time. But the meat of the report will still be here for you all. So with the schedule overview, this is a little hard to see, at least from where we sit, but we did include a schedule here. So the critical path, which means the sequence of work that is necessary to proceed sequentially in order to get to the end of the project, is identified in red. And in this case, seeding the plant, getting wastewater, and getting everything tied in between the new conveyance facilities and sending wastewater to the plant, that is our critical path to get to the completion of this component of the program. But that's controlled now by the pipe bridge. The pipe bridge, which was affected again from requirements of the programmatic agreement between EPA and SHPO. We've since cleared all of those permitting issues, and now we're on track to complete that portion of the project, and we're pushing Anvil very hard to get that done by October 1st. Mr. Irwin, you asked the question, how does this affect Philance Black and Veatch? What it ultimately means, if we can't send wastewater to Philance Black and Veatch to FBV by the time that they're ready to accept it and start the facility up and get the biological process going at the new facility, is that due to this gap in time, we have to actually run the plant in a limited capacity with clean water. And so as FBV has been testing the equipment, they're now starting to circulate clean water throughout the entire facility. We can't just shut it off and let it sit and wait for Anvil to get completed. We have to be able to keep the motors running, keep the rotating equipment running. Critical pieces of equipment like the membranes for the membrane bioreactors, which is the portion of the facility that separates the water from the waste in the water. Those can't be installed and run with clean water. So there are certain activities that they can't perform that they otherwise would have had they had sewage at the plant or wastewater at the plant. So what we have to do is suspend some of their contract work while they do the clean water testing, and then once the wastewater is ready to go, then they resume their contract work. So we have this interim period where Philance and the city are going to be working together to continue to operate the plant while we're waiting for Anvil to complete their work. The date that we've been operating on up to this point has been October 1st. And October 1st was, I would say it was a experienced guess as to our best guess as to when we would be able to be ready. And at this point in time, based on the latest schedule update, we have about 8 days afloat from when we think the pipe bridge is going to be ready, or when Anvil is anticipating the pipe bridge to be ready, on October 1st. So we're getting close, and we're optimistic with Anvil's recent change in management and leadership in the field and how things have been going recently that we can get that accomplished. With that, I'll just stop there and ask and take any questions you might have before we move through the rest of the presentation, and then we can wrap this up and take public comment.
So basically, is there a educated guess on what the exposure will be for how you ever say that?
Philance.
Philance, to put the project on hold? How many people are they going to have hanging around?
At this point in time, it's interesting. I had a pretty long chat with their project manager. He's a gentleman who runs a lot of the design build work for water, Black and Veatch, on the Black and Veatch side for their water projects. We had a long chat on my drive down today. And we're working out those details. But right now what we're carrying about $1.5 million in the budget for that potential exposure. We are in the middle of negotiating that with them. And so there's a lot of details to be worked out. But you asked how many people. There's probably going to be about 4 or 5 people that'll remain on site working closely with the city. What we're trying to do here is take what's a really challenging situation for the city and the project team and make a positive out of it. And so what that's allowing us to do is for a couple months, while they're circulating clean water, city operations staff can actually go out and train on how the plant will run. They can run through different scenarios. They can run through peak flows, low flows, really dig in and understand how the equipment can run. So FBV will provide 4 or 5 people. They may not be here full time, but they may rotate people in and out. We're working through those details with them. One of the things that is kind of surprising about that number, it's not just $1.5 million worth of labor, but if you think about this, they currently own this facility. They're under contract to deliver it to the city through the design build arrangement, and because of that, they have to carry bonds and insurance on it. They have to insure the facility against this. So they're in a risky position with this. And one of the details that we're trying to work out is if when we go through this period and once we send wastewater to the plant, things start not working right, that we could get into a finger pointing game if we don't carefully think through what this agreement looks like during this extended testing period. So
How much volume of wastewater do you need to get the plant up to speed?
So when the plant is brought online, we will get a truckload of sludge, activated sludge or active biomass from a nearby plant that like Paso or SLO. We want to find a plant that is in good operating condition. They're not in an upset condition. They're not running into any problems, but a good healthy biomass. They bring that in. I don't know how many thousands of gallons of sewage does that, but as soon as that seed sludge, we call it seed sludge, as soon as it gets put into the system, we've got to start bringing wastewater into the plant. So it's going to be a timed event where once we're ready to cut over the new system, we have to bring it in.
How much sewage do you have to? So basically, you go from 0 to
100%.
100% in what period of time?
In a day or two.
So we want to have 1 million gallons of sewage coming in there and that's what we're waiting for.
That's what we're waiting for. We need to have the pump stations up and running. So we're currently working through, Anvil's required to give us a testing plan and also a commissioning plan that's going to have a lot of details about how we do the tie-ins and how we do all the cutover. The city can't necessarily, the system isn't big enough for the city to run 2 plants simultaneously, particularly one that has an active biomass that is the treatment process. And that's what makes it pretty challenging, because when you have a system that's about 1 million gallons per day of sewage, you can quickly kill that seed sludge if you don't bring in enough sewage, because they need enough food to be able to eat the waste and then to get stable. So it could happen over a couple days where we do the tie-ins. There's 3 tie-in points. There's the main plant, and then there are 2 additional lift stations that need to get tied in.
Will any of the negotiations going with Anvil affect when we can start delivering sewage?
Absolutely. I mean, and so I said last week we met with them, and they had provided a schedule to us that showed. We didn't necessarily ask them in the latest schedule update when the pipe bridge was completed to show us a recovery schedule to get anywhere. What we wanted to see them do was submit a schedule to us that allowed them to complete their contract as expeditiously as we could. And so once we received that, we marked it revise and resubmit, and we went over that in a pretty long meeting with them where we started talking about when we needed the waste to get to the plant. We wanted to hit this October 1st date. What had to happen in order for that to happen? So right now they're prioritizing completion of what we call the joint trench, which is the 2 force mains and the effluent line. They prioritize that work all the way to tie it into the existing outfall to get the pump stations completed and have that all ready by October 1st.
Do you think that's reasonable, or do you think they can beat that?
I think it's reasonable, and I'm going to encourage them to beat that. The challenge with that is there are fittings on the pipe bridge that are long lead time items, and due to some changes that had been made from the design into construction, those fittings didn't get ordered until the last couple months, and they had about a 4 or 5 month lead time, and we anticipate getting those in early September. So if the fittings arrive early, we can get the pipe bridge completed earlier than they currently project.
Has there been any conversations with the manufacturer of the fittings?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what are they saying the limitations are?
Supply chain. It's a supply chain issue stemming from the global supply chain issues that affect almost everybody right now.
Can't we go get the stuff and bring it to the manufacturer?
I don't know if I understand what your question is.
the manufacturer has delivery scheduled for those parts now, right? Through their own, own contractors, et cetera, et cetera. Can the city specially contract someone to collect those parts from wherever they are and drop them on the manufacturer's doorstep?
I mean, that's a great question. I would have to look into that. I think that would be pretty unusual. And I mean, obviously it is an unusual circumstance, but what may be limiting it is the availability of raw materials. So it's the fabrication of these fittings that's really the critical path item. That's what's driving that's why the pipe bridge shows as a critical path.
What is the specific material which is limiting the manufacturer?
It's steel.
So the steel's just not available?
It's just not available. The long lead time, either it's not available or you have a lot of money flowing into the economy from stimulus, from federal stimulus and other programs right now, and everybody's busy. I mean, the supply chain is affecting, ask any contractor right now, and it's affecting everybody.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering if there was
No, that's a great
way
question.
If
And
we can short circuit that supply.
Yeah, I will certainly ask that question because we're keenly interested in not having. I mean, we need that pipe bridge completed. So they're going to move as much of it forward as they possibly can without those fittings. So you'll see it, and then once they get the fittings will be there and we'll be ready to go.
So the current delay is what, 120 days, something like that?
The current delay between FBV's contractual substantial completion date and October 1st, which is July 9th to October 1st, so July, August, September, so it's about 90 days.
90 days, so we're talking 90 days, and so we're talking, say, so we're talking a neighborhood of say, 500 times 90 for the labor costs?
Well, when we calculated this in a couple different ways. One is we asked FBV, what do you think the delay is going to cost? They said between $1 million and $2 million. So then we started using their extended overhead cost and some labor costs, and we calculated out to be about $1.4 million. So we felt pretty confident that $1.5 million was a good placeholder for that. And now at this point in time, that's a budget number, and that moves it into the budget.
And that includes the bond and insurance costs?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that's assuming that they would charge us $10,000 a day extended overhead, which is what their current estimate is, what they say. But we're confident, or we're optimistic that we can negotiate a better deal for the city on that, because that overhead cost just doesn't. We do have bonds and insurance, which we could probably find that number, but we'll get it from them. But that would be the full burdened rate for a big crew doing heavy construction. So we're optimistic it could be less than that, and we're.
Does Zanville have a performance bonus?
They do.
And how much is that?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
So, but unfortunately, this is not necessarily an Anvil issue.
Yeah,
this is an issue stemming from the cultural clearance of the bridge abutments. So if it was on the pump stations, and it was the pump station, it was their, if the pump stations and their contract work, which we didn't affect, was on the critical path, then be a much different conversation.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that a bypass was considered to get from the lift station A to the one by Limos?
Yes.
And
we talked a lot about it.
And the reason it can't be is because of traffic on Main?
Well, so what we would do for that bypass is we would only have to bypass the pipe bridge. So what we would do, but in order to bypass the pipe bridge, we would have to add isolation valves, what then would have to be abandoned after the bypass was taken out. And when we talked to operations staff and upon our recommendations, which also would be subject to supply chain issues, upon our recommendations, we didn't feel like it was appropriate to recommend in a wastewater system having buried valves abandoned in place, abandoned open, because that is a risky part to have in the ground in a wastewater system.
I'm just curious, the fittings that are this issue, they weren't ordered. Is that because of the change in the design of these abutments, because of the archaeological issues?
No, it was actually a change in the casing size. It was an issue between fabricating the casings and the design, and it was a design change, or it was a change that was made during construction between what was actually delivered and then what was in the design. So we're in the middle of digging into all these different issues, and once we see the time impact analysis and we do that analysis, we're going to come up with a recommendation to the city on how to deal with that.
So they didn't know what kind of fittings they were going to get until just recently.
It was a change in the casing. What ended up happening, it was a change in the casing size. The casings that they ended up getting were not the right size, and so we had to work between the designer and Anvil to.
So if the fittings don't come in on time, we're going to be delayed again.
That's correct. But we've been assured by Anvil that they've got them on order, and then we've got a delivery date, and they've been checking. We ask them about it every week. So hadn't changed yet. That date's still holding.
Okay, let's see. I think that, is there any other public comment?
So, Chair Rogers, I believe Paul still has
okay.
some presentation to give.
Yeah. And now we'll get into budget. So this was a lot of discussion about schedule. So what's really kind of interesting or a little bit weird about doing a quarterly report that relies upon data, in this case from March 31st, then we get a lot of the actuals from the city, so we can report actual cost of work performed, is that there's a delay between the time when we close the quarter and when we do the report. This so happened to be during budget development as well. So it's this strange thing where you have to write a report about something that happened 6 weeks ago. And so we wanted this to be meaningful, and we wanted to be able to discuss this. So what you read in the report is the budget status as of March 31st, but we discuss schedule as of the time we wrote the report because it was important to be able to do that. So what we wanted to do tonight, because the budget has been published and it is out because of the staff reports that have been put out for the next city council meeting, we wanted to discuss a bit about our budget development, what we went through in order to, what analysis we went through and how we adjusted budgets to make sure that we had adequately defined what we felt was the estimate at completion plus contingency for getting this project to the end and getting it over the goal line. So I'm going to go over each of the four components. I'll try to do it pretty quickly just so we can run through it, and then we'll look at the budget comparison table at the end of the, which we provided. We provided the overall snapshot of the budget for the city that went into the city's budget book at the end of the presentation, in the staff report. So for the WRF project WRF project component of the program, we increased the budget to cover the entire GMP. Given the different changes, and that's the guaranteed maximum price for the plant. Given some of the changes, given some of the delays, given some of the things that had occurred on the project, we felt it was prudent, it was risk smart for the city to budget all the way to the GMP, believing that there would be no savings achieved by Black & Veatch. There is a clause in the contract that says if Black & Veatch brings it in $4 million under the GMP, that the city and Black & Veatch split that savings. And so in this case, we wanted to cover the entire GMP because we wanted to tell the city. And it is just a difference in philosophy by the program manager as to how to budget. So we wanted to cover the GMP. We replenished the contingency to cover potential change and then a potential future change, which was about 5% of the remaining spend on the contract. So all in is about $800,000 of contingency that we hope we don't have to use all of. So again, we've got a couple of risk-smart things we wanted to do, which is to make sure the city had enough money in the bank to get this to the goal line should everything go haywire. We added $1.5 million for the delay claim. And so, again, we talked about how that was calculated. And then finally, we added budget for outfall inspection and testing. It's about $520,000. It was a quote we had gotten from a diver to get that accomplished. That's going to be a requirement for the city to continue to do that into the future to make sure that the outfall continues to perform and the diffusers are operating in such a way that that the city gets the dilution, which is required by the discharge permit. On the conveyance, again, we replenished the contingency.
Does this budget include decommissioning of the old facility?
It does not at this time.
However, our proposed budget to City Council does include that as a separate capital project.
Okay. So so moving on, are there any other questions on the WRF before I move to conveyance? Okay. So we got I think we had said in past change orders that the overall WRF program contingency was being depleted by change orders. And so in order, I think my colleague Kyle Rohr at the last quarterly report had indicated that we were evaluating the need to increase the budget because we were depleting the contingencies with each of the change orders and each of the amendments. So we needed to replenish that. And again, construction change order contingency, we set at about 5% of the remaining spend on the contract. So it's about $626,000 of contingency for future unforeseen change. Plus, we were carrying about that amount in potential change orders that included bridge abutment construction delays and that sort of thing. So it's about $1.3 million in contingency in the budget for change in this to get the contingency budget done. I had indicated that the existing RO facility had modifications that needed to be made, driven from the NPDES permit, the discharge permit negotiations with the regional board. We're currently carrying a budget of about $400,000. Anvil had done some preliminary pricing of that, and we feel pretty good about the number based on what the changes that Waterworks has been working on. And then we needed to increase the cultural monitoring budget. With the acceleration of schedule and Anvil working multiple crews around town, we needed to have more cultural monitors on, Native American monitors on staff to be able to observe ground disturbing activities, including bridge abutment construction. So we've had to increase that by about $400,000. That's a good number. That's actually a quote from Cogstone, who is our monitoring consultant, and we'll be bringing that change to council here at the beginning of June, the first council meeting in June. And then we needed to increase Waterworks budget due to the schedule extension as well, and then the RO facility modifications and some other changes. Sorry about the small print on this. Recycled water facilities budget was increased because we've just advanced that, and there's better definition of that project now. And so from when the budget was originally developed years ago to today, we now have better knowledge of what that project will entail, and so we wanted to make sure again that we've got sufficient budget to get this to the goal line. And so there are a number of different items in here: pilot injection well, professional services related to design and engineering services during construction for the actual construction of the injection wells and the pipelines, cultural monitoring, biological services, et cetera. So that's what is in the recycled water component. And then there's going to be some additional archaeological permitting due to the programmatic agreement, because this area has not been cleared for construction yet. So we're going to get ahead of that with Far Western as well. And then the program management budget increased by about $4 million. This is, again, due to schedule extensions. And then we've developed the budget based on historical spending rates and historical burn rates through the construction management. So our construction management budget is going to continue again toward the end of the year, and then major construction activities be done by the end of the year, and then we can close out the construction project. So the major construction we anticipate to be completed by the end of the year, with closeout activities occurring in the first calendar quarter of 2023. And so then from there, our spending comes down, and we then go to a much lower level of spending on the administration side. And so the end result there, again, was between program management and city costs. We needed to increase the budget across both of those to manage the program. So with that, you can see the different categories. WRF budget proposed an increase of $4.6 million. For a total budget of just shy of $80 million for the facility itself. Conveyance facilities just shy of $40 million, about a little over $2.5 million increase there. Recycled water just over $2 million. A lot of that due to, again, addition of professional services, additional cultural and resource monitoring, and then between city costs and program costs, about $5.5 million for administering that, to bring us to the number of just shy of $160 million for the total budget for the WRF.
Paul, you made a comment about the well area is not cleared for construction. I'm not sure I understood what you said. Could you please rephrase that?
Yeah, so similar to what we faced with and this is an interesting sequence when you have to mature a design when you're dealing because of the WIFIA funding that the city has accepted that triggers a much more robust review from the National Environmental Protection Act, right? So it's a much more robust set of requirements for archaeological protection, cultural resource protection. And so you have to take a design to a pretty mature level, like about a 90%, because deviating feet off of an alignment in ground disturbing activities could put you into a cultural resource that you would otherwise try to miss or try to protect. And so because of that, SHPO had not cleared that area for any ground disturbing activities beyond what we've done thus far, which is to drill a monitoring well and the pilot injection well. So pipeline construction and the injection well construction has not been, and I'm hesitating to use the word approved by SHPO because that's not really what they do, but you have to submit a monitoring plan. You have to then show them exactly where you're going to go and how you're going to protect those resources. Because of our successful track record thus far with activities in the area, we're optimistic that we can get through that process pretty quickly, but we do have to mature the design to a pretty high level before we can do that testing, the actual testing, and then submit the report from SHPO. So what we're trying to do is get ahead of that so that we aren't faced with the same sort of delays during construction that we had on Conveyance.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And with that concludes my formal presentation. I can take more questions if you'd like.
Okay, board members, questions?
Going through your thing there, so you're saying on page 52 of your quarterly report, you're guessing that our exposure to Felance is about $500,000. Page 22, you had, what was this BMP NOV response? What sort of stuff did we have to do for that?
So I don't know if I have the full report.
It was on page 22 of the.
Oh, page 22 of the report. Okay, I think it said 52. Apologies.
So how much did that cost?
It didn't. The NOV didn't cost. It didn't cost anything. There were no. I don't believe we paid. We weren't subject to any fines. That didn't cost anything else. It was just a notice of violation that the regional board had.
And you had to come up with some new BMPs, right?
What they ended up doing was beefing up the BMPs that they had already had on site to get prepped for the next rain event.
Was there a large cost associated with that?
I don't know the specifics around the cost related to that.
Okay. Page 34. There were legal services listed in a budget, and I was wondering what the scope was for that, those legal services.
So just a point of clarification, I believe the page numbers that Board Member Irwin is citing are the page numbers of the entire agenda packet. So this is actually Appendix B, Paul.
Right. I was looking at that.
Okay, thanks.
That's the city's legal. That's city legal. That's the city's attorney.
What sort of things was he looking at?
So we have attorneys involved in different aspects of the project, typically with contracts, but also with land acquisition, easement issues. We also run certain scenarios and potential legal strategies around our contract negotiations for things like delay claims.
Okay, that's reasonable. I just was curious. I just wondering what the relative scope. What is the percentage that you're withholding on the contract for Felance? Well, for the WRF program, is it 5%, 10%?
I know, what do you mean withholding?
When you pay our contract.
Oh, retainage?
Yeah, what's the retainage?
Oh, geez, I don't know. It's probably 10%.
Okay. This is on page 36. There was a planning load, and it said date submitted to be determined. What is the scope for the planning loan?
So the planning loan, that's the planning loan. That covers, the planning loan was work that was performed prior to issuing the construction contracts. So it would have covered design, program management services during design, and the lead up to the hard bid construction.
So we have about 700,000 there, which is being negotiated or has not been submitted yet?
That planning loan, the city's got various funding sources from SRF. There's the construction loans, and then there's the planning loans. And so the professional services for program management are generally sent against that planning loan. These also may be disbursements that are coming from invoices that were submitted months ago, because the SRF's kind of behind in giving their disbursements.
Okay, and then the CWSRF construction loan, we've got request numbers 2, 3, and 4, and 5, which are pending. What are these subject to? What happens? How do we have to complete? What needs to be completed before the approved amounts can be released?
It has to work through the state's process. So we submit the invoices to the state for payment. They review the invoices, and then they.
So there's been no communication with it.
We talk to SRF all the time.
Are they saying what additional info they wanted to have on it?
Yeah, they will ask for clarifying information sometimes, but a lot of times it's just them working through their process. Again,
okay.
They have a big workload, and they were severely impacted by COVID. So it's taking a long time to get things out of the state.
Okay. And then the WIFIA loan, everything matches up except for payment or request number 2. And I was wondering why they took 10,000 out.
Ineligible expenses. If they deemed that there wasn't sufficient information for them to actually approve the amount, then they just don't approve it.
And is there any chance to recover that?
It just depends on how aggressively the city would want to pursue that.
Okay. And then I had a couple of questions about program milestones, particularly what was the planned completion date for NTP was March 20th, 2020, and what was the actual date?
For which component?
Notice to proceed.
For the conveyance facilities?
This is WRF.
The actual notice to proceed for the WRF, I'm not sure I have that right in front of me.
Okay.
That's, we broke ground. It was in the middle of the pandemic was when we, so it wasn't long after that.
Okay. So there might have been a little bit of delay.
Yeah, it was. They're on schedule. They're on schedule.
Okay. Appendix F.
And I'll just add, I did get confirmation during your other questions, Advisory Board Member Irwin, that the construction loans through SRF, those pending reimbursements have been paid to the city already. I think this information is based on kind of time of writing, and a lot has changed since then.
Okay, wonderful. And then I had a question, Anvil, on change order 1, PCO 12, interruptions stations 147 to 150. Do you know what those are, or what area that is?
Yeah. So that's an area down by South Bay Boulevard and Quintana. As you head down, as the pipelines went down to the bottom of the hill, there was a known site there, and then when the cultural monitors got there, we had some new cultural monitors on, and they approached things much differently than the other cultural monitors did, so they slowed Anvil down for a few days.
So,
but it's also pretty challenging ground conditions, and they were pretty concerned about how close they were to the mapped boundary. These boundaries aren't hard lines in the ground. They can vary. So,
has there been any problems maintaining coordination with the monitors?
It's been a challenging situation for everybody involved, getting the monitors scheduled, and Anvil being able to plan and communicate their work, and being able to get the monitors lined up. We had some hiccups, quite a few hiccups for a while, and we've since corrected that with them.
Who do the monitors report to?
The monitors report to Allison Devereaux with Cogstone. She's the one that does all the scheduling. Cogstone.
So they're talking now.
Oh, it wasn't between the monitors and Cogstone. It was between Anvil and Cogstone. It was Anvil's communication to where they were going to be digging, what they were going to be doing, and on any given day. False starts, different things, just chaos, trying to get the schedule recovered.
Okay.
They're doing much better.
Okay. So the emergency generator mandates, PCO 28 and change order 2. So that's going to get reduced about 100,000? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's nearly the entire amount. I mean, there was some cost that was incurred as a result of that on Anvil's side, just because of dealing with those situations. But it's about that, nearly that, if not the entire amount of that.
So
almost all of it is going to be credited
So change
back.
order 2 is going to be to change then? Is that what you're saying? Or is it change order 4 will
Change order 4 will give that it'll reduce their contract amount by roughly $300,000.
Cool. Let's see, and yeah, the cultural monitor stuff came up. So the micro tunnel launch pit, what sort of stuff were they looking for there? That's Anvil 3, number PCO 39.
Is that on change order 3, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. 39. Actually, yeah, at the MTBM launch pit. That was an interesting area. That's actually was an old dump site. So it wasn't actually it's not a cultural site. It's more of an archaeological site. It was a site that was active for, I think, about 40 years. And so Cogstone needed to provide not an archaeologist, but it was an archaeologist to observe that digging.
Mm-hmm.
They actually found a bunch of old bottles and different things. Like I said, it was an old dump site.
Can we sell those bottles?
No, it's not quite how it's not quite how that's treated. So
Okay, thanks. Thanks. That covers everything I had come up with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other members of the board? Steve?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for Barry Brandon. Thank you for the extensive report. There were probably 5 slides or 6 slides in the presentation that don't show up anywhere. They're not in the agenda. They weren't anything written, and there was some pretty fine print. It looks to me like some pretty interesting reading, shall we say. Is there any way we can obtain that or have it posted so we can get the rest of his report where we can see it, or is that beyond?
It's certainly something that the city can make available. I'm not sure if we would post it in the same location as the agendas, but yeah, if you're interested in that, I can forward that to you.
My point is, when you come to a meeting and you have an agenda, and then when the presentations, this is the second PWAB meeting in a row where the presentations don't match up with the agenda, and that's I know it's a timely thing, but that's part of my understanding, the requirement, so that we can have public input, and especially when they're finally put on the board and I'm sitting 6 feet from the screen and I can't read it, I think that's totally inappropriate. Thank you.
May I respond to that, Chair? May I respond to that? May I respond to that comment, Chair?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so my understanding is that if we're not providing any, our presentations are not required to be included in the agenda packet. So the staff report in this case and the WRF quarterly report are the documents of record that are publicly available. The presentation is just to help facilitate the verbal conversation on this issue. But it's certainly not. It's certainly something that we can make available. So, if anyone is interested, they can contact me, and I'll check with the city clerk if there's a way to post that.
Thank you. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, Paul Donnelly again. A couple comments. I got to thinking when Paul was talking about the using clean water at the new plant to start it up. We're being asked to conserve water ourselves, so I'm wondering what the source of that water is that they're using at the plant to start it up. What becomes of that water? Also, the water they use to pressure test the pipes, flush the pipe, pig the lines, whatever it is. Where is the source of that water? Where do they dispose of it? Especially, like I said, we're being asked to conserve. The other thing is that on the WRF website, even though Paul mentioned that South Bay Boulevard was closed until just yesterday, it still showed on the website as being closed. I mean, the public already knew it. But what it didn't tell us is that the detour now is up into our neighborhoods, up into the heights. And, I mean, we're seeing countless amount of trucks going down our street, and everybody's racing down this street to get around that. There's no indication that we were never told that was going to happen, and it certainly is on the website. So I don't know who's responsible for updating the WRF website. And what it says on that site, it says this quote: "The City of Morro Bay is committed to ensuring you have up-to-date information about construction activities for the water reclamation facility and WRF pipelines." Really? It doesn't sound like it. The other thing is that I don't want to belabor the point, but about the vegetation removal on the bike path. The plans that showed the bike path, that showed the pipelines in the bike path, showed any trees did not exist when the commissioners met in San Luis Obispo in July 2009. Those plans didn't come to the WRF-CAC, you were there, Doug, until November of that year. That was the first time we saw those plans. Nothing existed that the commissioners could have voted on. In fact, all they had was an EIR determination saying that the trees would be avoided. So all of a sudden, it seems like we got a permit for these trees. No, you didn't. You never got a permit. Find the word tree in that permit. It doesn't exist. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to ask Paul Amico to respond to those two questions. First, the question about how do we update the WRF website, and then also the permitting of the removal of trees.
So first on the website updates, community members absolutely right. We're a little behind on updating that. So we are committed to that, to providing timely information, and we have an outreach lead, and I work with her frequently. We're trying to keep up with a lot of communication on a lot of different things, and that was one that was just missed. So the detour up through around Quintana, where we have lane restrictions for IPR installation and moving the joint trench up there, that detour was in place when we were on Quintana before, and so we worked with the city manager and Director Kwolek, and we had missed the broader notification to the neighborhoods up in the neighbors up in that neighborhood. So that was a miss on our part. It was a mistake. And then the second was
the issue of permitted tree removal.
Permitted tree removal. So it's the process of getting from the commission and the commission hearing in when we originally went there to then submitting plans. That process was stipulated through the coastal development permit process, and those plans then have since been approved. So the commissioners, and I can't quote the exact process, but ultimately we do have an approved set of plans from the Coastal Commission that are available for public viewing at our construction trailer out at the WRF site, and those plans are the final conform set of the conform drawings, or a set of drawings that did identify tree removals along the bike path that were needed in order to install the pipelines. Again, the reasons for the tree removal was either in direct conflict with equipment that'd be removing or installing the pipelines, or if we were to cut a major route while we were installing pipelines, it could create a public safety issue because the tree could then die and fall over into a public area, onto a public bike path. So many of the trees were removed to facilitate construction, and many of them were removed to ensure that the tree could remain viable into the future in a public area. The last thing I'll say about the bike path is we have a concept plan that we've posted to the website for restoration of that area. We have a landscape architect that we've been working with for a number of months for the specific restoration plan for restoring the area and restoring vegetation through the entire 70-foot easement that the city obtained from PG&E and Vistra. That easement has been staked. If the public isn't allowed in that area right now to go because it's an active work zone and it's not safe for people to be there, but the fencing that you can see from Highway 1 delineates that easement. So the easement itself, within that fenced area, the fence will be restored into a permanent state once we're done, and we're actively working with the landscape architect right now on the specific restoration plan that will identify tree locations that are these trees that will be then optimally placed so they don't interfere with power lines. Many of the trees that were along the bike path, the existing trees, were being topped and were being trimmed to maintain safety around the power lines, not necessarily with an eye toward the long-term health and viability of the trees. The new restoration plan that replaces as many of the 37 trees that we removed as possible will then be consideration of tree species in accordance with the city's tree replacement plan. It will be placement of those to make sure that they don't interfere with power lines. It'll be to beautify that bike path and to open it up and make it a more inviting public space. We're working through those details now, and as soon as that restoration plan is done, we'll be bringing that back to council and to PWAB to show what we've got and get input from the public on that.
I'm just curious, Paul, you mentioned that you have the approved plans in the trailer on the work site.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's correct.
I've been up there once. I know some of the board members were up there today.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm a little intimidated. I mean, is it possible to go up and see that?
Mm-hmm.
Can somebody
Absolutely. We've got people there
ask
during
to
normal
see
working hours.
We'd like
Yeah.
to see this coastal commission approved
Right.
tree restoration plan.
Right. I mean, go ahead.
Chair, if I may add, the city, there was a lot of public discussion about these tree removals last fall, and on our website, we posted a whole write-up on the tree issue and the justification and explanation about the permitting, and made the same offer to folks that they can come to the trailer and look at the approved plans, and the public is still able to inspect those plans. I believe we even called out the language. I'm trying to find it on my phone right now, but I don't see it. But again, if it's not up on the website anymore, I can get it back up there. So this was an issue that we put to rest because there were a lot of questions about it. I think the permitting process is a bit esoteric, and so we want to make sure we explain that to the public for those folks who have questions about it. So I will commit to getting that up sometime next week on our website.
The one thing,
But in addition to that, I'm going to try to find Damaris's, you called it the urban tree plan? Is that what it was?
The Urban Forestry Management Plan.
Okay, all right. Good. I'm going to mine the website.
one thing I would ask, a favor I would ask would be, if anyone wants to come and look at those plans, and I believe they're also on the Coastal Commission's website, and we've got those available. But the requirement of the Coastal Development Permit is that they are available for viewing. A hard copy is available for viewing. That is the official stamped set of plans. Is that people don't just turn up out at the WRF site. That's still an active work zone. Again, it's not for the public to be there unless they're escorted and they understand the safety rules that FBV, because that is their site. So please get in touch. Let's try to make an arrangement for if anybody wants to come out. We'd like to have that be an appointment. Also, we have people that have to manage the construction, so that would be good. Thanks.
Got 3 minutes.
All right. I have a few things. They're small, but I wanted to mention them. So in Teresa Drive, I visit that facility several times a week. I have a relative who lives there. There are 2 cuts that go across Teresa Drive from, to they go across. So you go in, they weren't filled in so that they're flush, right? I don't even know why they were there. They've been cut, but they're there. So if they could get flush to the street, even everybody who goes up there would be appreciative of that. And there are many, many, many truckloads a day of material being taken, I'm assuming, off Quintana Road and maybe the Las Tunas area that go down Pacific. Watch them go by all day long. And as far as this disagreement with trees and how many trees were taken, and it was approved by the Coastal Commission Coastal Commissioners, that means it's a public hearing. That never happened. There's CDP that was, quote, approved by the Coastal Commission and was a hearing at the Embassy Suites in San Luis Obispo, was 10 pages long. It's very easily to get access to that, and it mentions nothing about trees, just so you know. So I don't know what Anvil's talking about. The plant was mentioned that it's going to be ready to accept 1 million gallons of sewage, forget what he called it. Really, it's going to be about 500,000 because Cayucas is off of our plant, so we're really not in violation of anything that the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the reason this whole thing started. So they've overbuilt the plant up where it is now. The pipe bridge segments that they're talking about, they've been sitting out in the elements for over a year. They've been exposed to rust. I don't know. Once they finally get in, maybe you could add 2 years to that. They're staged over on Atascadero Road, right as you pass the high school,
30
to the right.
30 seconds.
And replenishing of the contingency budget to cover the PCOs with future changes with project, that contingency had $9 million in it to start with, this whole project. It is now at $43 million that they've used. It's not to exceed $126 million. Really? You just saw tonight that we were at 160. We're all betting that it's going to get to over 200 million, and I really hope that
Thank you for your comments.
that Anvil will keep us, the citizens who pay for this, in mind when they're negotiating PCOs.
Okay, are there any public comments in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any raised hands in the queue.
All right. Let's see. Is there any further board member discussion? Okay, can do we need a motion to approve this report?
No motion.
I don't think we need that, do we?
Chair, but we did request any feedback. Also on the budget approach that was detailed in the staff report that Paul outlined during his presentation. It's okay if there's no feedback, but if the board has any feedback, now would be a good time to state that.
Well, I think there's been plenty of public comment today.
Okay.
Let's move on to A6. Thank you, Paul. Do we have a presentation from staff?
Thank you, Chair Rogers. We do. Just want to say that we're really lucky to have Mr. Eric Ridio as our new city engineer. He has extensive experience in capital projects, and he's very interested in what the needs of this community are. And so, something we've been talking about since he got here is how do we talk about capital projects, because the nature of capital projects is such that there's a lot of planning work and there's a lot of environmental work and design work that doesn't necessarily get seen, and if we're not showing it, the public may think that we're not doing anything. And so we talked about potentially bringing a document to the PWAB and possibly even to council, where we occasionally or semi-regularly will go through the capital projects that we're working on, the ones that are on our radar, the ones that are funded and not funded. And I think we brought that up at the last PWAB meeting, and board member Irwin had some good feedback for us. And so we are back here today to present basically a spreadsheet of everything that's on our radar. I do want to mention that this is not the same thing as the list of capital projects that we'll be proposing as part of the fiscal year 23 budget process, which will be published this Friday. So we do have a proposed budget for capital projects for next fiscal year. It's somewhere in the ballpark of 18 million, with 12 million or so of that being for the wharf, and the remainder being for public works capital projects. So that is not the same thing as what we're presenting today. We're just today presenting a very high-level look at what are all the issues that we're aware of, what are the things that we have funded, what are the funding sources, what's the progress, et cetera. So we hope to bring this semi-regularly. I'll stop talking now. I'm going to hand it off to City Engineer Eric Radio to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kwolek. Yes, so the presentation tonight is basically going through the spreadsheet that was in the staff report and highlighting some of the projects. And again, these are active projects, so these are projects that have already been budgeted for and are in process at one degree or another. So as I go through these, if you have questions on the specific projects, we can go ahead and address those as we go, or you can wait till the end. Either way. So I'm not going to be going through every single project. So again, if you have specific questions, please feel free to ask. So we've divided the projects up by essentially the different departments or the different categories of work that the projects involve. With the first of the spreadsheet, I need to zoom out a little bit for the those viewing at home.
It might be too small for them to see, though.
Okay. Again, this is in the staff report, so if folks want to see that on our website, they can. So starting with the parks projects, we have a very small project. It's a bocce ball, a couple of bocce ball courts. The reason I start with this is because I have the final design on my desk, and we're working through that to get 3 quotes for that bid out very soon in the next couple of weeks. So I know that's a very important project to the recreation department because there's some folks who really are wanting to get going on playing bocce ball in the near future. So that's about $30,000 we have budgeted for that. In today's market and pricing of materials, we're hopeful that that would be enough, but it's the construction bids are all over the place, as you would imagine, with price of fuel, price of everything. So, but we are prepared to look for alternative funding sources if we have to. Coleman Park is another project that we've talked about at prior meetings. This estimated cost includes the restrooms and other work at that park that, again, concepts were brought to the PWAB and there's been community engagement, but that by no means has been designed. This is just literally a placeholder for some of the grants that we've applied for. So as far as obtained grant funding, it's only about $350,000 of that. So there's other grants we're looking at to expand the work and to do more work than just the restroom work at that site. As far as facilities go, we've got the Vets Hall where we currently sit, some work that needs to be done, additional work on the audiovisual for, it seems that these hybrid type meetings will probably be more of a permanent situation, so there's more work that the city needs to do to make this facility more audiovisual ready to be able to do that, as well as some needs for the kitchen, HVAC, and other needs that are in the budget. There's some charging stations that we've talked about at the last PWAB meeting. Moving on to the water and sewer. Again, the wharf project is one piece of this. There are water projects that are in process, and one of them being the Nutmeg Take and related pressure zone improvements. This project is in a very early stage, 30% design. I think the original project looked at replacement of the tank. There are other upgrades that need to be done on this system. And again, it is very early, but our next step is to look at full procurement of PS&E, which means plan, specs, and estimate in order to get a design for that. The water tank rehabilitation is in process, and the other two on there are for projects at the existing wastewater treatment facility, which include the reverse osmosis treatment building and some piping take modifications. As far as sewer, the wharf project, which we just discussed, and there are 2 collection system improvement projects that are in process as far as design. That includes the Main Street and Atascadero Road. It's about 50% complete as far as design goes, estimated at $4 million. And then the wastewater collection system improvements for Beachcomber, main replacement, and what we're calling the backyard sewer main improvements. Those are really 2 separate projects. The Beachcomber main itself is fully designed. We have not procured or gone out for advertisement on that project yet, but it is one that is probably going to be going out in the near future. The backyard, all of that tract has mains that go through the abutting properties, and so that part of the system has not been designed as far as where the new mains will go, where they go in the existing locations, or if the existing mains are relined. That is yet to be determined, so that's design work that has to happen still.
Is that, quick question, is that design work done by a contractor? When you say design work, I know city staff is limited, so I'm just curious, who does the design work?
There's options as far as doing design. You can procure the design with an actual engineering company, or if you did a design build, that's a different procurement method. That's something we'll certainly look at, but at this point we have someone under contract to actually do the design.
Yeah, and so just a point of clarification, when we talk about contractors, we're generally talking about contractors that do construction. When we're talking about companies that are under contract for these sorts of services, we call them consultants. So yes, we do typically work with engineering consultants for that design work.
And then if we go to the harbor, those are just 3 of the projects that are in the existing budget. There's many other capital needs that we'll get to a few of them on the unfunded page. But the Beach Street slips, some design has been complete. This is something that we're working with Harbor as far as getting the next steps in place, but a lot of the delays have been due to lack of funding. Maybe there's some money budgeted, but through preliminary design or analysis, it's been found that there isn't enough funding to complete the project. So the South T Pier renovations, $55,000 isn't near enough to do the work. It was found that was just some structural analysis was done. A concept design on the boat launching facility is in the budget, and it looks like possibly in the next fiscal year there will be funding for actually doing the boat launch, but that's again in the proposal to council that of course is not approved. So in transit, there's one project that is currently in process, the City Park Transit Hub improvements. This is something we'll probably be bringing to PWAB in future meetings to bring you a status report. But
and I'd like to add something there, Eric. That project has been in the pipeline for quite some time. We're very far along on design, and we're actually slow walking that one a little bit because we cannot get into the construction phase of the project until after Labor Day, and that's because Art in the Park. So the location of this project is City Park, and Art in the Park takes place on Memorial Day, I believe July 4th weekend, and Labor Day. And so we cannot risk interfering with that. That's a major event for the city, and so we'll be planning on doing construction after Labor Day for that one.
moving on to street projects, as we discussed earlier, the current fiscal year project, $1.1 million for the annual pavement management, and this fiscal year's project is an arterial dig out project, which I shared on a couple meetings ago, as far as doing some major rehab of some of our arterials in town, and then with a future project doing a surface seal over those areas. The State Route 141 main intersection improvements. This, of course, is a very long-term project. It's been in the works for quite some time. We are still in what's called the PA-NED phase. There's a lot of acronyms. It stands for Project Approval in an Environmental Document. This is a required process whenever you do anything on the state highway system with Caltrans. So we do not have the full funding for construction of this project. So we have funding to carry us through design, certainly, and part of construction. So that's as design would start probably sometime in 2023. That's at which point where you develop estimates to be able to better know what the construction costs will be. Wayfinding project is in process. We have that under contract with Statewide, which is a local contractor in Nipomo. And not surprisingly, the issue there is lead time on powder coating materials. The project was awarded several months ago, but there's a significant lead time on materials for those specialized signs. Stormwater, there are 3 projects in the budget. One of them is 90% design is complete and is what we characterize as a very high priority, because there is a storm drain that actually has failed on Juniper at Elena. It can't be seen from the road, but it's back in an easement between 2 properties, and it's something that the city needs to act on once design is complete. So we'll be procuring that soon after design is finished. The other 2 projects there are underfunded at the moment, but we will prioritize that funding for other drainage-related projects. Some of these stormwater systems are very, very old, and corrugated metal pipe is the material that a lot of the stormwater system in the city is made of. And this Morro Bay isn't unique to this situation, but a lot of the invert on these pipelines is rotting out. So one of the things I want to look at is having a consultant look at videoing all these lines and coming up with a plan, whether we replace some of the worst areas or maybe even look at relining a lot of these storm drains that are potentially could have issues in the future. Certainly we don't want them to fail, so it's something on our radar. And then the last, all these other projects are not, it's not a complete list. There might be other projects, but these are the ones that we've discussed in my time with the city as far as projects we're looking for funding in the upcoming budget, or they're just not funded at all. They've been identified possibly in the One Water Plan as being projects that need to be looked at, or due to other needs. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Back on the item for the transit station design, you said the design's in work but not quite finished, but you're hoping to be in construction after Labor Day. I don't know anywhere in the city you can get a building or get a permit approved in 2 months and then get contractors on contract. Do you have
So the transit hub itself is an existing structure. It's an existing facility. So we're essentially replacing what's there with more modern equipment and more ADA accessible equipment. So as far as getting permitting, it would be likely categorically exempt. So it'd be something that the turnaround time is it's not near as if you're doing a new project in undisturbed ground. So we don't see that being an issue for the timeline. As far as design, we have 90% design. Some of the final things we're looking at is the style of the bus shelter and some finalized things that transit and our department are looking at.
Okay, so even if you were ready to go out for bid, do you think you could have anybody on contract that would start that soon?
Yeah, so we're not saying that we're going to start immediately after Labor Day. That's just our time frame to avoid any construction before then. But usually ideally we'd have this advertised July or August, and then we wouldn't. We'd be under contract, but we wouldn't issue the notice to proceed until after that timeline.
Okay, I'm skeptical because I know EMC Construction, we're doing remodeling, and I can't get people to start work by September 1st, and I can't get plans approved by September 1st. So I guess is the building of transit facilities exempt from all of the rest of the delays?
Is the building of transit facilities, I'm sorry,
exempt from all of the other delays that every other project has?
So once you're under contract, that's when you start talking about schedule. So there's built into a contract, there's a certain number of workdays, and if the contractor is not confident that they can perform the work in those workdays, they would either bring that up pre-bid through a request for information or not bid on the project at all. So, those things would come up early in the conversations before any construction starts. So, if some of the items like ordering the shelters, if they have long lead times, then those things need to be identified early in the construction process. So,
Okay, thank you.
I would just add also that we would have until Memorial Day of 2023 to get the work done. And the work is not too complex by capital project standards. So sure, there is a chance that if we don't get any bidders, that would be a problem for us. And that happened with the pilot injection well that we went out to bid with. But then we eventually did get a bidder for it. So yeah, certainly we don't want to say that we're not treating it with any urgency at all. But we are just cognizant of not having construction interfere with the art in the park.
Okay, thank you.
If I recall rightly, you don't need a permit, but you do need to have planning department review. Is that right?
yes, that's correct. For any roadway work, any that's an existing right-of-way, there is a planning review, and likely in those cases they're categorically exempt.
Anybody else? Robert?
Sorry, I did have one question about the boat launch conceptual design. This will use the existing boat launch site, or is there another site being proposed?
This project is new to me, but I'll try to speak, and Greg, if you have any other input. But I believe it's the existing launch facility. It'd just be looking at ADA access and other improvements of that kind. The concrete is very severely deteriorated, so they would look at if they need to do any geometric changes to the existing facility.
I'll just add that one of the issues with this is that without a conceptual design, it's very difficult to apply for grant funding for this kind of project. And so the intent here is to get that conceptual design. Don't quote me on this, but in my conversations with the harbor master, the city actually received a grant for this project, but then was unable to get any reimbursement for any of the work of the related work that we were going to undertake because we did not have a design ready to go. So we're trying to make some of these projects shovel ready so that we can put in grant applications and then use the money.
Ian?
No, I don't have any right now.
John?
Yes, a few things. I've heard rumors that the reverse osmosis stopped working, and are we trying to restore the operation of the reverse osmosis at the existing plant?
I'll let Damaris handle that, our utilities division manager.
It still works.
Mhm.
It works to this day. We use it
So,
every week.
So what was all the stuff that was removed from that plant, or from the building?
The desal portion of it was removed
Okay.
a couple years ago.
So it just, basically, we just have to rehabilitate the treatment system? That's what?
No, the RO skids are still there that we use. The portions that were removed had to do with the desalinization portion of it.
Okay.
And the project you're talking about there, it needs some modifications.
Okay.
So we need more calcium carbonate tanks to store more, and then some piping modifications and some moving of some tanks.
Okay, so it's just modifications.
Yeah.
Let's see, streets, couple. What percentage of the $1 million of the estimated annual pavement project is going to be arterial dig out?
During the initial PS&E phase, which got up through, I believe, 65%, so not a full design, the estimate was about $800,000 of that would be for the pavement. There's also inspection and other costs associated with that. We are trying to do some concrete improvements as well with this project. And then there's some added scope. I think we were looking at the police parking lot as well.
Yes, and advisory board member Irwin, are you asking what percentage of the project will be dig outs between arterial versus Collector Street?
Yeah, or annual pavement. I mean, it's not just collector streets which need maintenance. We need to work on the residential streets too. There's some interesting potholes forming and things like that.
Yeah, so as far as I understand, and Eric can clarify, but the work is going to be done on Main, Pacific, Harbor, and is there some on South Bay? So,
are there any residential streets up for maintenance?
Yeah, this existing project is not a residential street project. It's been in, I think it started back in 2020 or 2019. So at that time, the project then was shuttered, or all work on it was put to rest through COVID. We are reactivating the project, getting final design, and it is focused on addressing the rutting on the main arterials, or some of them may be collectors. I'd have to check the actual road classification, but I believe they're all arterial roadways. And then a future project would do a surface seal over the entire roadway once those rutted areas have been repaired. And then as well, a future project would look at addressing some of the residential areas.
Yeah, the amount of money I see there does not, SB1 and the Q&E measures, that would have generated in the neighborhood of $2 million since we suspended pavement maintenance. What happened to the other $500,000 million?
I'll share that in our budget proposal that we'll be publishing on Friday for the budget hearings. The capital budget hearings will be on Wednesday of next week. We're looking at proposing $1.7 million for pavement management for fiscal year 23.
That includes the arterial dig out?
Not the arterial dig out, but so.
Okay, so there's other funds,
yes,
which are not identified here. Cool.
Yes, and that's because the basis of this project is what was started, as Mr. Ridio said, 2 or 3 years ago. We're just reactivating this project. We didn't really add anything to it.
Okay, now that makes sense. Let's see. I don't have any questions. Got the storm drain. You said that's all one water. So the numbers SD 11, et cetera, on the unfunded or other unfunded future projects, those are all out of the One Water project, One Water manual? SD 06A, SD 06B, those are all
I believe that is correct.
Okay. And the last thing I've got to understand is, has initial discussions started with Cayucas for decommissioning the wastewater treatment plant?
Yes, and that's wrapped up in negotiations that are confidential for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But yes, the city has been talking with Cayucos for several months already about this.
Excuse me. So I'm assuming that all issues are on the table, including what happens with the site after the WRF starts up. Is that right?
To an extent, speculation about how the site will be used could have impacts on negotiations. And so, again, because the negotiations are confidential, it's not really something we could talk about.
Okay, cool. That's answers all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any public comments?
Hi, Linda Donnelly again. I just have one, and I don't know if the city has given any thought or if they will give some consideration to the funky design that is now currently our bus stop. Is there some way that they can preserve that with doing your improvements? You know what I'm talking about? Local artists painted what looks like a living room, and there's a funky couch in there, and it's bumpy. Nobody's going to sit on it or sleep on it, rather. But I mean, local artists got together and did that, and if you haven't actually looked in there, you should. So I just want to bring that up because I bet you they're not watching this and they don't have any idea this project is coming forward. So anytime I think we can keep the funky character of our town in mind, because I think this is why a lot of people like Morro Bay. We live here. We don't necessarily want to turn it into some other place. So that might want to be considered in your design somehow, right? We got all this money we're spending everywhere else. Why not look at something, that we can maybe save? All right. Thank you very much. Good questions tonight.
I'd like to respond to that, if I may, Chair Rogers. I happen to have a special interest in the art installation. I think it's really neat. It's something we hope to retain, possibly not at that location, but somewhere else in the city. So I take that comment to heart.
Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments in the queue.
Okay, then do we have any further board member discussion? Okay. I don't know, do we need to approve this report? I think we do. Okay, so let's move on to future agenda items. Do any of the board members have any items that they would like to see in addition to this list?
It sounds like we probably ought to have a brief thing on the transit center there when we come up with a final design, so people don't get surprised.
No problem.
Okay, and of course, I'm interested in the whole tree plan, and Damaris, I'm going to try to find your your plan on the website. Okay, so I think with that, I don't think I need to ask for more public comment on future agenda items, so I hereby adjourn the meeting. We've gone to 8:09 tonight. So thank you all very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.